So for the sake of the students who may not be having this paper, let me just share the paper with you. So please confirm whether you are able to see my screen. Confirm whether you are able to see my screen, you great students. Are you able to see my screen? Are you able to see my screen? Are you able to see my screen? Great. Thank you so much. Yes. So I shall read this very fast. Remember, so many students here fail simply because they don't have even these great techniques of reading the questions. AAA, you need to understand how to read the questions very well and always start with the required. So like in this question, ladies and gentlemen, what are we required to do here? We are required to discuss how professional skepticism should be applied to the statement made by the group finance director. Professional skepticism. Explain the principal audit procedures to be performed on the impairment of goodwill. 3, recommend 2 procedures to be used in performing a forensic investigation on alleged bribery payments. Any 2 procedures to be used in performing a forensic investigation on alleged bribery payments. So then I'll straight away, having read the questions, I'll straight away go to reading the beginning, from the beginning of the question now here. So you're told you are the audit manager in Hasibu and the company working on the audit of Safari Group, the group whose financial year ended on 31st March 2015. This is the first time you have worked on group audit. So you don't have any prior experience in managing group of companies. It is the very first time you are working on group audit. The draft consolidated financial statements recognize profits before tax of 600 million, 2014, 900 million. Great. And total assets of 900 million. And we're told in this case that 2014, these assets here were 820 million. So you can see a growth in terms of total assets. The group manufactures equipment used in telecommunications industry. Goodwill of shillings 100 million. Goodwill of shillings 100 million is recognized in the group statement of financial position, having arisen on several business combinations over the last few years. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I would want you guys to do me a favor. If you take this 100 million goodwill, you divide this 100 by the total assets of this group in the current year, and then change the figure you are getting to percent. What is this percentage? 100 million over, you can see the total assets of 900 million. The current year's total assets are 900 million. So what is 100 million divided by 900 million? Somebody please talk to me this afternoon. I would want to hear you. What is 100 million divided by 900 million times 100? 11%. So what is your take of this asset called goodwill in regards to materiality? In regards to materiality, what do you think? Is it an item that should scare an auditor? Yes, 11% is way too high. 11% is way too high, ladies and gentlemen. This is an asset, if it is not properly accounted for, will straight away have a big impact on the financial reports that we have. 11% is material. Is so big, I mean. So as an auditor, when I get a material item, ladies and gentlemen, I have to ensure that I look at it critically, professional skepticism, because I know if this asset is not accounted for very well, then there is a possibility that we may indicate that our financial reports here, status is up there, and yet, ladies and gentlemen, we are supposed to be reporting things that are on the south. Bad things. So this is a material item. Now we are told, ladies and gentlemen, here, we are told, ladies and gentlemen, an impairment review was conducted in March 2015 by the group finance director, from which an impairment of 5 million is to be recognized in respect of goodwill. So there is impairment review, and they're getting impairment of goodwill in the financial year to be 5 million. The group finance director has prepared a file documentation to support the results of the impairment review, including notes on the assumptions used, his calculations and conclusions. So the group finance director has prepared quite a good file for us to be able to review how the impairment was done. And he has done even something very nice by putting down all the assumptions that were used and even calculations. So if I need to review any of these documents, I have a great file over there. He made the following statement: I don't think you need any evidence other than that contained in my file. I know this is quite stupid, because it means that this guy would want me to rely on internal evidence alone. As an auditor, this is so bad because I know that this guy wants to limit my scope of operations. Remember, an auditor's scope, ladies and gentlemen, an auditor's scope is 360 degrees. So don't confine me to one area of gathering evidence. I mean, to gather my evidence, ladies and gentlemen, I know that anything that I get internally, of course, it's good, but never good enough. Internal evidence is not as strong as external evidence. And I mean, if I only work with this file, it means that I'm only relying on one individual, who is the finance director. In terms of reviewing goodwill, there are so many things. For example, I would want to review the board minutes to check, ladies and gentlemen, how, or rather how much, yes, the purchase consideration was. Right? So don't, in this case here, put me just in one box. In one box, no, that one I refuse. That one I can see a limitation in my scope there. Great. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are told here the assumptions used are straightforward. That is the director is trying to tell me. So you need to look into them in detail. The assumptions are consistent with how we conducted impairment reviews in previous years, which is very good for me. Very good for me. And your firm has always agreed with the assumptions used. That is my firm. But remember now, the engagement partner is very different. So you can check that back to last year's audit file. All of the calculations have been checked by the head of group internal audit department. Good enough, but not convincing really. I still have to do further checks. The group finance director has also informed you that the two members of the sales team are suspected of paying bribes in order to secure lucrative customer contracts. The internal audit team were alerted of this when they were auditing cash payments, and they found significant payments to several new customers being made prior to the contract being signed. Theft, I can see theft, yes, straight away. Inducement, they're trying to bribe to be able to get what here? New jobs, to be able to create more business for the company. Of course, in Africa here, I'm so sure so many of us will say, we are looking for work, right? But essentially, ladies and gentlemen, bribing is a criminal offense, right? The director has asked if a Cebu company could perform a forensic investigation into the alleged bribe payments. So they wanted us to do something very simple that all students here in section 6, all students at this advanced level will be able to do very easily. Discuss how professional skepticism should be applied to the statement made by the group finance director. This group finance director, ladies and gentlemen, wants us, in this case here, to confine ourselves in a file that he has produced and consider that to be sufficient, appropriate audit evidence for purposes of what here, making my conclusion as an auditor. So the very first thing that I'll do is to recognize the fact that is to show the examiner that I know what professional skepticism means. Ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of time, I'll straight away tell you that professional skepticism is that attitude of doubting, that attitude of having a questioning mind, right? So whenever I'm given like financial statements, ladies and gentlemen, like this, I need to doubt and believe and have that strong belief within me that these financial statements have been misstated, that there are errors and frauds which are existing. So when you talk of professional skepticism, I'm repeating again, this is that attitude that is required of an auditor, which will enable him or her gather sufficient, appropriate audit evidence by having a questioning mind. By having a question mind, you doubt all the figures given in the financial statements and you get to doubt everybody you are interrogating. You doubt everything about the firm. And with now the doubts, you'll be able to question, you'll be able to dig deep for you to be able to get what we call quality evidence. Quality evidence is both sufficient and what are appropriate. So I'm so sure that all of us will be able to write that nicely. But the part that we shall forget is the part where we are supposed to weave that statement with the question, right? So in this regard, I'll have to create a paragraph where I say that as the auditor, remember you have been tasked up there. You've been told that you are the auditor. So in this case, I'll say straight away that as the auditor, I would doubt all the statements given by me from who? From the group accountant. I'll doubt. I'll have to do a lot of questioning within the firm to be able to gather, please listen to me, you must keep on repeating that, to be able to gather quality evidence, which will enable me form an informed opinion. I have to doubt everything that I've been given by who? By this director. Meaning that at the end of the day, I'll have to broaden my scope and look for more evidence because of what here? Professional skepticism. So ladies and gentlemen, from the many words that I've been using here, if you're told here to define what professional skepticism is in a few words, what will you be able to tell the examiner? What is professional skepticism? In a few words, just to see whether we are together really. Just a few words, what is professional skepticism? Having a questioning mind. I like what I'm seeing here from Madam Phoebe. Great. Being very inquisitive, a questioning mind. Thank you very much, Nancy. Right. In this case, you should never believe what you are being told in this case here at the face value. Know that most of the thieves, actually all people you are dealing with outside here as an auditor, you're supposed to know straight away that they are what here up for something to deceive you as an auditor. Yeah, to gather enough evidence, Irene, I love that. To be able to gather enough evidence, sufficient, appropriate evidence, Apple, I love that, yeah, questioning mind. But please don't forget to weave your story with the question given, with the question given. You must bring the characters in the question to your answer. And everything is straightforward. Like in this case, I'll say everything that this guy was telling me that, I mean, even if this guy has told me that he has got a good file, you are relying, you should be able to rely on it. The assumptions are good, that even last year's auditor was able to rely on them and they gave a good opinion. No. I mean, I'm supposed in this case here to use my professional judgment, where I should be able now to doubt everything that this guy is telling me, right? So I want to believe with what you guys have, you'll be able to earn those 2 marks. Thanks, Emmanuel. Don't rely on the statements given by who? This director. Thank you so much. So with your permission now, I'll be able to go to part 2 of this question. Explain the principal audit procedures to be performed on the impairment of goodwill. Explain the principal audit procedures to be performed on the impairment of audit goodwill. For the students that have been teaching here severally, could you kindly talk to me, speak to my heart? Whenever these guys mention anything to do with the audit procedures, what acronym should come to your mind? What acronym should come to your mind? RAEOO, always. It doesn't matter, even in part C down here, they've mentioned something to do with forensic procedures. The same, always think about RAEOO. RAEOO. So RAEOO, what do they stand for, somebody? So RAEOO, RAEOO. That's something that people should never forget. So RAEOO, R stands for analytical procedures. Analytical procedures, that is R. And then we have A. A, which is E in English, stands for an inquiry and a third-party confirmations. An inquiry and a third-party confirmations. An inquiry and a third-party confirmations. That is RA. E, somebody has already mentioned there. E stands for inspection. E stands for I, stands for inspection. RAEOO. O in this case here stands for what here? For observation. Right? O stands for observation. And then we have a U, which stands for what here, somebody? Recalculation. U stands for recalculation. So are we together? Have we been able to take those small notes first of all? All of us, have we been able to take those notes there? Yes, thank you so much. So then, having gotten these procedures in general, how do we answer this question? For example, under analytical procedures, I would pull like 2 or 3 points from there. Under analytical procedures, what am I supposed, ladies and gentlemen, to mention under analytical procedures? Remember, pertaining to what here? The goodwill. Remember here, they are very categorical. Don't start giving us amorphous things. Things in this case here that are outside there in the forest, and yet you've got the rabbit with you here, right? It is principal procedures to be performed on the impairment of goodwill. On the impairment of goodwill. On the impairment of goodwill. Yeah, also substantive tests use the same, RAEOO. Use the same. Even in the test of controls, use the same, RAEOO. Right? So an analytical procedures, ladies and gentlemen, the very first thing that I will do, analytical procedures comes from the word analyze. Do calculations, right? You're analyzing, you're computing ratios. For example, get the income statement of last year, right? Check the impairment loss, which was there. You can even compare it to who? You can even compare it to the sales of last year, right? So compute that like a fraction. Impairment loss of last year versus the sales of last year. Impairment loss of this year. So try, you can even look at the growth in the impairment loss. Is the impairment loss growing, right? So check those percentage changes, and in this case here, observe trends. Like, ladies and gentlemen, we expect that impairment loss should be increasing with time. Impairment loss should be increasing with the time. If it's not increasing, then I'll need, ladies and gentlemen, a very good explanation from the management. If it's not decreasing, I mean, right? Right? No. It should be bigger and bigger as we it's like depreciation. It should be bigger and bigger as we proceed. So we are saying, ladies and gentlemen, analytical procedures, I'll be able to compare the changes of this impairment loss and track on the trends, right? That is very important. And then now I'm going to something very important here. Still on this impairment loss that has been given as an audit procedure, I'll of course look at the assumptions given, and I shall recalculate at least for 1 year. As an auditor, the RAEOO, I shall recalculate the goodwill impaired myself. That is an auditing procedure. So I shall recalculate. And of course, the answer I get, I'll be able to compare with the answers that were obtained by the accountants of the firm. Whatever I get and whatever had been obtained by the accountants of the firm, ladies and gentlemen, if they are quite close, that means that the difference is immaterial. I'll not ask for what year, I'll not ask for any adjustments to the figure. Right? So the concept of what year? Recalculation. As I do this, ladies and gentlemen, I'm a bright person. As I do this, what I'll do, I'll remember there is the A for inquiry. So an inquiry, of course, I will inquire from the management. Now I'm no longer talking of the finance director alone. I'll inquire of the management on how this figure of impaired goodwill, impairment loss of goodwill was arrived at. So I'm inquiring, just a simple email, right? And I'll even give them the template, how they need to answer. So I'll do inquiries. So the template that I'm giving them, I'll basically expect what we call a representation letter. So I'll inquire from management how the impairment loss was calculated or arrived at. And of course, at the end of the day, I would expect a representation letter, which now should be able to bind them. They're binding, remember, it is their responsibility to calculate. It's their responsibility to give us financial statements. So they need to bind themselves and tell us, this is how we arrived at this figure. Ladies and gentlemen, I will still cast this net wider. I'll cast this net wider. I know if goodwill that was computed was wrong, then the impairment loss will also, in this case here, be wrong. So I'll also recompute the goodwill. I will recompute the goodwill. So to demonstrate broad and deep understanding of the subject, you are required here to remember the goodwill working. Is there somebody who can just remind us how do we compute goodwill, ladies and gentlemen? The students who are doing advanced financial reporting, how do we normally compute goodwill? We normally take what plus what minus what? How do we get goodwill? So purchase consideration of the parent plus the fair value of NCI plus the fair value of NCI minus what here? Minus net assets. So it is purchase consideration of the parent plus fair value of NCI minus what here? Minus the net assets. Right? So I would want, ladies and gentlemen, in this case here to do what here? To confirm whether this computation was okay. So and the best way of confirming this is to recompute. So I will recompute this. Of course, I'll ask for all the information. So meaning, ladies and gentlemen, here there are so many audit procedures. Like I would want to inspect the board minutes to see how much the purchase consideration was. I would want to check the board minutes to even see how the impairment policy, somebody is mentioning this there, looks like, right? I would want, ladies and gentlemen, to review the disclosures in the financial statements to see whether the net assets were computed properly. So remember now, I have straight away skipped to I. I is inspection. Inspection is where we talk of documents. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, when you have these material items in the financial statements, you must have disclosures for each one of them. There'll be a place where they show you how goodwill was computed. So I'll straight away go to the disclosures section in the annual reports and see whether the disclosures were done properly. How are the net assets like? How did they arrive at the figure of NCI? That will be very important. And remember, in that case, you're talking about I would review, because you are owning up. You've been told you are the auditor. I would review, right? So ladies and gentlemen, I think with the points we have given you here, you will be able to mention so many things when they bring this kind of a question in an exam. I would do this, I would review this. Because like even the purchase consideration, ladies and gentlemen, which was paid, it wasn't just paid like that. There must have been an invoice, right? I'll confirm the purchase consideration to appropriate invoices, tallying the same even to the bank statement of this company for the year, in the year that this particular goodwill was acquired. So there are so many things that you really need to check to bring yourself up to speed regarding to the accuracy of the goodwill computed, of course, and what year the impairment loss. So many things you really have to do what year to check. Even for example, listen, ladies and gentlemen, I'll still in the analytical procedures review the growth in sales. If I realize that sales is going down and down and down, it means that this subsidiary does no longer have this goodwill. So I'll ask for an increase in the impairment loss, because why is sales declining from year to year, right? So remember, whenever the examiner asks about audit procedures, anything that you say, so long as you own it up and you're trying to fix it to the question, at the end of the day, you can never be wrong. You can never be wrong. Everything there will be what here will be correct. So I would want to get some affirmation that we are together. Are we together really? Are we together really? Are we together really here? Are we together? Are we together? Great. Thank you so much. So we go to the last question. The last question, and now this one is yours. It's quite a straightforward question, There were some bribery allegations up there. They want us to recommend 2 procedures to be used in performing a forensic investigation on alleged bribery payments. Remember, forensic investigations are exactly the same as what here? They're exactly the same as audit investigations. Only that forensic audit or forensic investigations, whatever you come up with, will most likely find itself before some judge in a court of law. It will be used as evidence in some court. Otherwise, the procedures are, it's something that you get off the head, right? So I would want to hear from you in terms of these bribery allegations. What are some of the forensic investigation procedures you shall use? Of course, for those of you who have done this topic called forensic accounting and auditing, you know that the best procedure here is the inquiries. Now, let me first of all keep silent a little bit so that I can wait and see what you guys points will give me. Don't give me the one of inquiries. Now I've finished that one where you interview the employees, right? Including the suspected perpetrators here. So don't try that one. That one already is a procedure that I've given to you. Still, you're deriving this from RAEOU. Anomondi is saying inspection. I love that. But please tell me, which documents are you going to inspect here? Which documents shall you be reviewing? Because you must be very specific now. Yeah, understanding the nature of the bribery, understanding the nature of three-way match, LPO, invoice, receipt. I love this. I love this. The three-way match, I have to do matching of the LPO, the invoice, three-way match. So I'm writing these points down to see whether you guys in this case here would have answered this question appropriately. So assess whether there was an opportunity to steal. Somebody is saying in this case here, check the standard operating procedures laid down, whether they were followed to the letter. So in short, he's telling me in this case here to go back to the internal controls to check the effectiveness of internal controls. never mention this like do a substantive test, Caroline. What are you telling us? You know, they want specific procedures. Specific procedures. Circularization, who do you circulate whatever questions that you have to? Right? Thank you very much, Irene. This is a very good point. That according to Irene, in terms of inquiries and third-party confirmations, she would interview some customers on a sample basis. She would interview, in this case here, some customers here on some sample basis, right? You guys are not answering this in terms of R, A, E, O, U. R, A, E, O, U. Like now, under checking the weaknesses of the internal controls, which is very good, that automatically falls under inspection. Under inspection. Under inspection, I would want, in this case here, them to give me a detailed ICS, internal control systems, and of course, these standard operating procedure manuals, for me to be able to assess the loopholes. I love that. To assess the loopholes that these guys were able to exploit, to be able to steal, to be able, in this case here, to gain business through bribery. Right? Can the internal auditors be interviewed? Remember, that is at your discretion. So long as you talk of interviews, you'll talk of interviewing, in this case here, employees, interviewing the internal auditors, whoever. And inquiring from management, ladies and gentlemen, about this bribery situation, whether they are aware of any bribery allegations in the firm, and asking for a representation letter. Ladies and gentlemen, remember those cash count sheets, the cash count sheets. I would want to review. I would want to review those particular sheets when these people count the cash. Those sheets, so they write how much was collected on that day. And of course, the moment I get those amounts, I would even want to trace them back to the bank statement. Remember, you don't know why these guys were really, the bribe could go even beyond getting customers. It could go, ladies and gentlemen, even to the point of when these customers are paying, they're allowed in this case here to pay less amount. And then at the end of the day, in this case here, they get like full clearance, right? We have the ascertainment of the amount lost. The amount lost, if there was any amount that was lost, it will be very important for me to ascertain this. Right? Remember the question that we are doing, ladies and gentlemen, here is September 2015. September 2015, question number what year? Question number 1, boy, and now we are doing the last one. Recommend only 2 procedures to be used in performing a forensic investigation on alleged, remember they are still alleged, bribery payments, only 2, but you expound on them. When you talk of inspection, if it's documents, try to mention the documents. Remember, you must also read the question very well for you to be able to understand exactly what to write. Like, you know, this third paragraph, the group finance director has also informed you that 2 members of the sales team are suspected of paying bribes in order to secure lucrative customer contracts. Of course, like somebody had told us that she will interview these customers. Some of the customers who refused to pay bribes will come and really hint to you that for sure your people have bad manners. Your people always want something, especially the customers who at the end of the day will not be able to get contracts because they really refuse to pay the bribes. So the internal audit team was alerted of this when they were auditing cash payments and found significant payments to several new customers being made prior to the contract being signed. So you can see there is a contract, ladies and gentlemen. There's a contract involved. So in that case, then there is a procedure there. The procedure in this case will be to review the contract itself, right? And of course, look at the payment vouchers to see whether the date in the payment voucher and the date in the contract, whether there is any tally, right? We expect, of course, to pay these people after, for example, supplies. So you expect the vouchers here to be what here to be coming much later. So there is something in this case here really that I have talked about what here, even the bank statements. When was this money in this case here paid to these customers? Because at times these guys who are clever enough for concealment purposes would want to raise the voucher much later, right? So I'll check the voucher, check the amount paid here when this amount was withdrawn from the bank vis-a-vis the contract. So I'm seeing from Nancy discuss with management to understand how long the fraud has been taking place. This is very important because if the fraud has been taking place for a long time, it means that the internal control systems of this particular company are so weak. So it means, ladies and gentlemen, that I will not be able even to trust the internal controls. It means I have to do more, have to increase the sample size. I love this, Nancy. This is a procedure. So the most important thing, ladies and gentlemen, that you're supposed to know is that these procedures, whatever you say, so long as you've said it in a good way and you're trying to weave some of these procedures here to the question, you will end up getting all the marks. You'll end up getting all the marks. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, and I would expect you guys to really subscribe. I would expect you guys to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and if possible, make comments there. If possible, share these, because I would want to reach out to many members who love auditing, who love CPA globally. If you wish to register courses with us, we are RCM Online College. Our number is 0719 525,000. 0719 525,000. Please try as much as possible to avoid physical classes. Try as much as possible to avoid physical classes because the industry has really changed. The industry has really changed. Accountants are required here to work more online. So don't go asking for any training in physical classrooms. Join Zoom online colleges and you'll never go wrong. Thank you so much for having been good participants, and I know you are subscribing to the channel and sharing the same. Thank you. Bye.